One of the most surprisingly profound conversations in Euphoria happens inside a quiet diner when Maddie Perez begins talking to Rue about something called equanimity. It isn't framed as some grand philosophical speech. There are no dramatic camera movements or inspirational music. It's just two people talking over milkshakes. Yet buried inside that conversation is an idea that has been discussed by Stoic philosophers for over 2,000 years, embraced by Buddhist teachings for centuries, and practiced by some of the most emotionally resilient people throughout history. The knowledge that everything is exactly as it should be. Not because every event is fair, not because every outcome is pleasant, but because reality cannot be anything other than what it already is. Picture this scenario. There is a girl who has just found out that her boyfriend cheated on her. Her friends tell her she should be furious. Her parents tell her she's better off without him. Social media tells her to know her worth, delete every photo, hit the gym, and make him regret everything. So which one is right? Should she be devastated because the relationship is over? Or should she be happy because she's finally free to move on? What if the answer is neither? Imagine if someone told you that the relationship ending wasn't good or bad. It simply happened because it was always going to happen. The betrayal wasn't a detour from your life. The heartbreak wasn't an interruption to your story. It was a chapter that could never have been skipped. And whether you spend the next 6 months crying over it or smiling about it, the ending itself remains untouched. That idea sounds almost offensive at first. We spend our entire lives believing that our emotional reaction somehow changes reality. We believe that if we worry enough, regret enough, replay enough conversations in our heads, eventually something about the past will shift. But it never does. In this video, we're going to break down Maddie's mindset, why that diner scene completely changes the way you look at disappointment, betrayal, and uncertainty, and how this philosophy quietly explains why Maddie became one of the strongest characters in Euphoria after everything she endured. Welcome back to the Mogul Manifesto. On this channel, we analyze the most famous characters, public figures, and moments in history, and dive into the truth, the psychology, and principles of power. Let's begin. The first lesson begins with something so insignificant that most viewers probably didn't think twice about it: the milkshake. Rue asks Maddie whether the milkshake she ordered is any good. Maddie responds by saying, "It doesn't really matter. Whether it's terrible or terrific, it's all the same thing." Rue immediately pushes back. How can terrible and terrific possibly be the same? They're complete opposites. But Maddie calmly explains that there is only a difference, and the difference makes no difference to her. At first, the statement feels almost nonsensical. We naturally categorize everything into opposites. Success and failure, rich and poor, beautiful and ugly, winning and losing. We convince ourselves that one side of every outcome contains happiness while the other contains suffering. But Maddie is pointing towards something much deeper. The milkshake has already been made. The first sip is already sitting in front of her. Whether it tastes amazing or awful changes absolutely nothing about reality. If it's delicious, reality doesn't improve. If it's disgusting, reality doesn't collapse. The only thing that changes is the story she chooses to tell herself afterward. Most people don't actually suffer because of events. They suffer because they endlessly compare reality to the version they wanted instead. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if you are distressed by external things, it is not the thing itself that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. That is exactly what Maddie is demonstrating. The milkshake becomes a metaphor for every uncontrollable circumstance in life. The job rejection, the breakup, the unexpected diagnosis, the friendship ending, the opportunity someone else receives instead of you. By the time you become aware of any of these events, they already exist. Fighting reality after it has arrived is like arguing with yesterday's weather. No amount of resistance changes what already is. Equanimity is not pretending terrible things are wonderful. It is recognizing that your emotional resistance cannot rewrite reality. Ironically, the more desperately we try to mentally reject what has already happened, the more power we hand over to it. Acceptance isn't surrender. It's refusing to waste energy fighting something that no longer exists as a choice. The second lesson is why Maddie, of all people, is capable of saying this, because nobody watching Euphoria can honestly say her life has been easy. For most of the series, Maddie builds her identity around control. She wants the perfect appearance, the perfect relationship, the perfect image. Even when she's surrounded by chaos, she refuses to let anyone see her vulnerable. Then everything begins falling apart. Her toxic relationship with Nate leaves emotional scars that are impossible to ignore. She becomes trapped in cycles of manipulation where every conversation feels like psychological warfare. The person she trusted repeatedly weaponizes her emotions against her. Then comes perhaps the deepest betrayal of all. Cassie, not simply because Nate and Cassie get together, but because the betrayal comes from someone Maddie considered family. Friendships carry an expectation that romantic relationships often don't. You expect strangers to disappoint you occasionally. You don't expect your closest friend to quietly dismantle your trust behind your back. Earlier in the series, Maddie reacts exactly the way most people would. She becomes furious. She feels humiliated. She wants answers. She wants justice. She wants someone else to acknowledge the pain they caused. But eventually, something changes. The diner conversation reveals that somewhere between all the heartbreak and betrayal, Maddie stopped trying to control outcomes she never actually controlled in the first place. Cassie's decisions were never hers to command. Nate's behavior was never hers to rewrite. Other people's choices belonged to them. Her suffering came from believing they should have chosen differently. That realization doesn't excuse what happened. It simply removes the impossible burden of trying to mentally rewrite history. This is why forgiveness is so often misunderstood. Forgiveness isn't saying someone deserved another chance. Sometimes forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. It's acknowledging that carrying resentment into every future relationship gives the betrayer free rent inside your mind long after they've left your life. Maddie doesn't become emotionless, she becomes lighter. There is an enormous difference. The final lesson is perhaps the hardest one to accept. Equanimity is not about becoming indifferent. It is about becoming impossible to emotionally manipulate. Most people unknowingly give away ownership of their emotional state every single day. If someone compliments them, they feel valuable. If someone insults them, they feel worthless. If life goes according to plan, they're confident. If one unexpected obstacle appears, they begin questioning everything. Their inner peace depends entirely on external circumstances behaving exactly the way they hoped. That isn't peace, that's dependency. Maddie's philosophy quietly rejects this entire way of living. When she says everything is as it should be, she isn't claiming every event is morally correct. She isn't saying injustice doesn't exist. She's saying reality exists independently of our approval. The rain doesn't care if you want sunshine. Time doesn't pause because you're grieving. People don't suddenly become loyal because you desperately need them to be. Life unfolds according to countless causes beyond your control. Once you truly understand that, you stop exhausting yourself trying to control every variable. Instead, your attention shifts to the only thing that has ever belonged to you, your response. This idea appears across almost every enduring philosophy. Stoicism teaches that some things are within our control and others are not. Buddhism teaches that attachment creates suffering because we cling to outcomes that constantly change. Even modern psychology echoes this through radical acceptance, encouraging people to stop fighting reality before deciding how to respond to it. Maddie doesn't quote philosophers, she doesn't preach, she simply arrives at the same conclusion through experience. Life becomes dramatically lighter when you stop demanding that reality ask for your permission before it unfolds. That quiet diner conversation isn't really about milkshakes. It isn't even about Maddie. It's about every moment you've ever wished had happened differently, every breakup you've replayed, every rejection you've obsessed over, every betrayal you've carried for years, as though your anger could somehow reverse it. None of those things become less painful overnight. Equanimity doesn't erase grief. It doesn't eliminate disappointment. It doesn't magically transform tragedy into happiness. What it does offer is freedom from the exhausting belief that your resistance changes reality. Maybe the goal isn't to force yourself to be happy when terrible things happen. Maybe the goal isn't even to stop feeling sadness. Maybe the goal is to finally understand that peace was never hiding inside the outcome. It was hiding inside your relationship with the outcome. Because whether the milkshake is terrible or terrific, whether people stay or leave, and whether life unfolds exactly according to your plans or completely destroys them, reality remains exactly what it already is. And perhaps the most liberating realization of all is that you were never responsible for controlling the story, only for deciding who you become while living it. You're one step closer to becoming your dream woman if you enjoyed this breakdown. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to join the Mogul Manifesto family. Check out our page where we upload countless videos on the psychology and it girl advice you need. With our help, you'll start recognizing these patterns, and soon you won't be able to recognize the woman you've become. This is the Mogul Manifesto.